Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Binoy, for inviting me to speak here today. My greetings to Mr. Chaudhary, Executive Director, Reserve Bank of India, and all of you present here, ladies and gentlemen. So I was sharing a story just before we walked into this about my connections with Mumbai. And I think I have a connection that is older than many people in this room. I can see a few gray-haired folks in the room, so they would probably remember 1995 when I started, or I was involved in building the first mobile network here in Mumbai. I certainly believed then, and I certainly believe now, that Mumbai is the heart of entrepreneurship, heart of really out-of-the-box economic activity. And that is true then, that was true then, and it is true certainly today as we speak about fintech and look to the future. Since the event is about fintech, let me just give you a quick summary of where we see technology and fintech as almost like a report card. I think it is clearly now being recognized by the world that India has become a preeminent nation, has become the preeminent nation in using technology to transform people's lives, citizens' lives. UPI and the corresponding fintech ecosystem is a component of that vision, component of that goal, has reformed government and governance, ensured financial inclusion, formalization of our economy. And most uniquely, and this story when I repeat, as I travel around the world, is something that amazes people about how a problem that was solved by our Prime Minister, the problem of a long-standing mistrust between government subsidies and government benefits and the citizen, that famously was characterized by a Prime Minister in the late 80s as a system of governance that entailed a cost of 85% when 100 rupees left Delhi, 15 rupees reached the beneficiary's account. That problem that defined India for decades, defined Indian democracy and governance for decades, was sought to be solved by our Prime Minister in 2014-15, and that has spawned, in turn, a fintech ecosystem that is among the fastest, most admired, and clearly the most creative fintech ecosystems in the world. At 87%, India has the highest fintech adoption rate in the world against the global average of 67%. And the fintech ecosystem is a key part of what we see as the digital economy, key part of what the Prime Minister refers to as India's techade, and the digital economy goal of $1 trillion by 25-26. That is where we are today. So let me give you two kind of snapshots. One is a backstory to this, and let's look forward a bit. The backstory to this is in 2015 when the Honorable Prime Minister launched Digital India. And he laid out three broad goals that he sought from that policy, that scheme, that initiative. He said, number one, that he wanted technology, and he put this as number one. He wanted technology to transform citizens' lives by creating changes in governance, by changing and transforming democracy. He wanted, as second point, he wanted to expand the digital economy component of the overall economy, create more opportunities for our young Indians, and in turn, trigger entrepreneurship in the digital economy. And third, he laid out these three goals, and the third goal was, from over 3 decades of being a consumer of technologies, he wanted India and Indians to be leading technology, to be designing, architecting, building devices, products, solutions, and platforms for the world. So, from a consumer of technologies to a producer of technologies. These were the three broad objectives. So if you fast forward to 2022, thank you. and you take a report card of these 3 goals, you certainly come to the conclusion, even if you're the bitterest critic of the government, if there is such a thing, of course I don't count Rahul Gandhi in that, but if there is such a thing, that we have progressed significantly on all those 3 goals. And in 2022 July, when we were celebrating the 7th anniversary of Digital India, and I was on the stage with the Honorable Prime Minister, I told him this story about how I was in the audience when he first laid out this vision in 2015. And I was, by then, about 10, 12 years in politics. I was as cynical as you could get. And I told him very candidly that I too did not realize that those goals that you had set before the nation would be met and we would travel such a long distance in this short period of time. And certainly we have traveled a significant distance in the last 8 years since Digital India was launched. And if you have any doubts about it, go to the colleges of India, and I have as the honor and privilege of having traveled to 42 colleges in this last 18 months since I was minister. The energy, the optimism and the confidence amongst young Indians towards the entire space of entrepreneurship and technology entrepreneurship in particular is something to be seen and experienced and to be believed. So we are today, like I said, in these 3 domains, we are moving forward significantly. We have a goal of $1 trillion digital economy. And we are, in 2014, a nation, we always had a digital economy, but our digital economy was dominated by the ITES space. If you look today where we are not just growing robustly in the ITES space. We have clearly established a mark globally around the internet with D2C at scale, whether it is e-commerce, whether it is fintech, whether it is many, many categories of applications and platforms and solutions on the internet. And we are slowly and steadily moving into many new areas that include electronics, microelectronics, design innovation, manufacture, semiconductor design innovation manufacture, AI, the blockchain, high performance computing, cybersecurity. So clearly, a single dimensional digital economy that we inherited in 2014 is becoming a much more broad-based, high-growth set of independent, asynchronous segments of the digital economy that are all growing fast, rapidly, and are creating innovation in their wake. On August 15, 2021, as we stepped into our 75th year of independence, our Prime Minister looked forward to the next 25 years and coined a phrase. It is a phrase that describes the next decade. And he called it the India Techade. And that India Techade is a decade full of technology opportunities that today is not just a buzzword or is hyperbole or is it not rhetoric. It is really about saying very clearly that the digital economy piece of our overall economy will go from the 6 to 7% that it was for many, many years to almost 22% by 2026. So this is the broad backstory. This is where we are today. So what do we do? What do we expect? What can we expect going forward? So certainly I believe, and I will certainly share with you what we are doing in the government, and it's of course for you all to say how far forward you will go. As the government, we are very clear about this $1 trillion opportunity. We have kept this front and center. Our Prime Minister has mandated that this India Techade will be built by Indian entrepreneurs, Indian startups, and young Indians all over the country. This is not something that will be dominated by or concentrated around 2 or 3 or 4 companies, as we have seen for 65 years of independent India's history, where economic activity were concentrated around 4 or 5 or 6 groups. This is a landscape. The digital economy is a landscape. There will be thousands and hundreds of thousands of young entrepreneurs innovating at the speed of light, or whichever metric you want to compare it at, in areas as diverse as, like I said, the blockchain, to AI, to semiconductor innovation. We in the government, our first step is that we will create an enabling framework of laws and policies. And what is certainly of interest to you as the fintech entrepreneurs and the fintech ecosystem is that shortly we will be legislating, we will be taking to government and legislating a digital personal data protection bill. And for all of those who were very intimidated and overawed by the previous draft, this is a bill that has 3 central objectives that we have managing to harmonize. Number 1, that the bill will not create any hiccup or road bump or any sort of hurdle to the innovation ecosystem growth. That is central to all our legislations, that the legislations are enabling legislations to the growth of our innovation ecosystem. So in the DPDP, first, the innovation momentum will continue, citizens' rights will be protected, and the exceptional circumstances under which the government has to have access to personal data in emergent situations will be also permitted. Those of you who have seen the draft, it is a very simple, easy to read draft that many people think will put lawyers out of business, which is not a bad thing. So this is really about being easy to understand legislation that lays out what the obligations of a platform are, what the rights of a citizen are, and how those will be balanced and met. Around the corner, we will have a Digital India Act. The consultations and discussions around its architecture and its goals is starting next week, or this week, later this week. And the Digital India Act, for those of you who have read about it, or those of you who know about it, already know that it's a successor to the IT Act. But for those who don't know about it, this is really a global standard contemporaneous legislation that addresses the future of the internet, addresses the future of the tech innovation ecosystem, addresses issues of openness, user harm, accountability, emerging technologies, the guardrails to handle risks, the various types of intermediaries. In 2000, when we looked at the internet, there was the internet and there were these ISPs and maybe a few platforms like yahoo.com. And today, the diversity of intermediaries, the complexity and the differences between different intermediaries require different types of regulation and different types of rule making, and so therefore that DIA will recognize that. And it will be, as with everything we do, enacted, built, designed with only consultation. To give you an example of the amount of effort that went into consultation for the DPDP, the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, we consulted for over 90 days. Each of those consultations were lead managed by me. I was present. Consultations were deep. Every view, as bizarre or as absolutist, were taken on board. And when the views were divergent, we spent a considerable amount of time explaining our position and then getting people to agree on the goals and objectives of the legislation. So the legislations that we are going to create are legislations for you, and you can think of MeitY and the Government of India as the enablers of that legislation. And this is a reversal of the original process where there would be a government legislation that would be thrust on the ecosystem, and then there will be all kinds of blowback and confusion created by that. So we approach it that way. So the DIA and the DPDP will be 2 prongs of the innovation ecosystem, the legislative framework. This will, and I don't mean to say this in a way to scare anybody, but certainly there will be some behavioral changes and there will be some changes in the way platforms interact with consumers and citizens. The days where personal data could be harvested and learning and algorithms being built on that will certainly change. The days that anonymized personal data would be stored for many years and days, and you create these learning platforms on top of that, learning models on top of that, will also certainly, I think, have to be replaced by something that is much more instantaneous in terms of learning and storing. So there will be these incremental changes. It will not be business as usual, but the AI intensity in fintech, as with almost everything on the internet, is something that I think, I'm sure most of you already know, but will certainly increase. We are launching by the end of March or early April, the India AI program, which will be one of the largest publicly assembled, publicly available data sets in the world, with 3 centers of excellence that the government of India, under the Prime Minister, has recently announced in the budget. And so the India AI ecosystem, working with the fintech ecosystem and with any other ecosystem, will certainly catapult and catalyze the transformation or the next generation of fintech and other parts of the internet. I will not say anything more excepting to say that our goals, just share with you that our goals for the future of the internet is that we expect the internet to be open always, that is free from any dominance, whether state or private sector. We expect the internet to be safe and trusted for all our digital nagriks. We have 800 million Indians today using the internet. By 25, that number will be 1.3 billion. So the internet has to be a safe and trusted space. And accountability, which is that the internet and all platforms on that will always have a legally drawn out design of accountability to the consumers. That is our goal. And as I said, the fintech ecosystem is a shining example of India's entrepreneurship, India's confidence, and young Indians and young entrepreneurs messaging to the world that we are here to compete and win. And I hope in the coming years and in coming months and coming years rather, that this type of momentum will continue. And I only want to share with you that the government of India, on its part, will do everything to continue the growth, momentum, and expansion of the fintech ecosystem. Thank you very much for inviting me again here today. Jai Hind.